So yeah, again, it's a complex subject, and I do get the impression nobody seems to care, or they just don't get it, right? But I mean, I've been on a few hangouts through Twitter, and many who profess to be awake, they'll point out one little section of society, and apparently this little section of society run everything. And what I've always tried to say is it's literally behind most religions, if not all now. Yeah? There are certain religions of which one could have some confidence on, and that their goals were by and large decent. And certainly historically, and I talk more recent history, say the last 150 years, for example, Christianity has been a positive force for good. You could successfully argue. But what's behind all this, as I keep dropping the hint on, is, for example, as regards the UN, the major driver behind the UN is theosophy. There's no two doubts about it. It's amazing the amount of older books where theosophy is at least hinted or mentioned. Now, certainly Huxley's dropped a hint more than a few times. Orwell dropped a hint. I was quite surprised to find that even Ayn Rand in The Fountainhead, she drops the hint. There is a number of people, authors out there, past authors, who have dropped more than a hint about theosophy. And unfortunately now, most people just don't seem to look at this. I've described over the years how my interactions with, for example, councils, helping friends in relation to social work, the education system, the NHS, if you mention, well, with these very confident people, that term, things change instantly. I have found that mentioning even theosophy has, just put a dent in an interview, for example, or flustered a discussion. And when you see what's going on at the ground level, especially just now in Ireland, people aren't grasping the numbers. I'm not talking about the immigrants here, the economic or otherwise, into, let's face it, land masses that are already struggling to house and heat and look after their own. And yet, by the day, they are forced and pushed to accept people that really don't share our values and have their hands open all the time and feel that somehow they are hard done by, even although we now know for definite, for example in the UK, that we could have solved homelessness years ago at a fraction of what they're spending almost daily now on housing people who do not share our values, and many of them are just here for the handouts. No loyalty to host countries or whatever else. And let's face it, they're coming from one of the world's largest land masses. That's another thing most people don't even think about or contemplate. Look at the size of Africa, yeah? And yet we are having to accept, for example, in the UK, an island with limited space, Ireland, funnily enough, another island with limited space. But this is part of the plan, though, of this transformational change that, for example, many in the Scottish Government and the Parliament keep dropping the hint about, but nobody picks it up. Now, I know that Resisting the Lies DJ, otherwise known as DJ, he's working it out. He's seeing this connection. He's hearing this term. And I'll give you an example of it from his channel, and one I always recommend because, wow, his uploads. Otherwise, I'd never get to see or hear about this. But we've got Patrick Harvey, who has pushed for transgender, this, that, and the next thing, the education from the indoctrination from quite literally nursery school, love is love, blah, 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 the sexualization of children, because let's be honest, none of this used to be a thing, and I've said it many times. I'm Gen X. We started learning about sex somewhere in secondary, usually about, a year or two, statistically, before most children go through puberty. And that was the very basics, and it did us fine. And we went on with our lives, all the better for the minimalist approach, whereas now it's do what thou wilt. And LGBT, X, Y, and Z propaganda throughout every aspect of the education system. Because this is collectivism on steroids. This is 21st century communism. It is so many things, but the main driver of the UN, of which they're all but puppets, is theosophy. Every single thing, for example, that the SNP implements is UN policy, right? And yet it professes to be a nationalist party when it's the polar opposite of that, yeah? And with all that in mind, and we're already 6+ minutes in, thank you for bearing with me, under fair use, Patrick Harvey.
In your manifesto, many people would say it's not an important issue in this election. Why is the monarchy and getting rid of the monarchy specifically important to you and your party?
I mean, there's a fundamental principle at stake here that I believe we should be a democracy. Power should be accountable, and someone who occupies a position like head of state.
Well, he's just lying through his teeth there, and I can say that with confidence. It can't be a democracy if it's actually run by UN puppets like this guy, him being, of course, the Green Party. I should have, if I haven't stated at the start of this, but, you know, they're all intertwined. The Green Party, the SNP, Labour, Conservatives, because all you need to do is look at their actions, yeah?
The public should decide if they're doing their job right or if they want to get rid of them and replace them with somebody else. But I think there's a symbolic issue here as well.
Symbolism is also very important to them.
We all know that one of the huge problems with the UK as a whole, and it's impacted on Scotland dramatically, is inequality.
Inequality. This is all communist terminology. Yeah? They create... See, in order for them to be successful, they have to constantly divide and conquer the sexes, race, you name it, the whole bloody works. It's, you know, because the demonization of, especially in the UK, white men is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. Yeah? It's blatantly racist. But they get away with it.
This is a really wealthy country.
For some, yeah. Oh, don't get me wrong. Scotland has got huge assets. And the one that people miss most, or don't realise, is the sheer amount of water that Scotland has for the size of it. It's astounding. There's more water in one loch alone, that being Loch Ness, than England and Wales combined. And I think that's by a factor of 2. One loch. And we've got lots of them in Scotland. Yeah, asset-wise, huge asset. And then let's not forget the vast gas fields that are known to be around the Scottish coastline and slightly further afield, but yeah, still in the remit of Scotland, that nobody's discussing. And of course, many oil fields that are still plenty oil in it. Yeah, we've got vast resources. Yeah. And then, hey, you want to talk green? Tidal power? Absolutely. Believe it or not, there's more coastline in Scotland than there is in England, as an example. It could be England and Wales combined. I'm not too sure about that, but it's Scotland, believe it or not, it's got a vast coastline proportionate to its size. Seriously. So tidal, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Not these windmill bird blenders that they've got. Remember, they masquerade as Care Bears, but the amount of death and destruction they've caused, both to, well, wildlife, and of course, let's not forget, to put these 900-year-old technology monstrosities in the form of windmills, yeah? But they call them wind turbines, yeah? They've had to, so far since, what was it, 2000? Since 2000, and I've covered it in recent past, these tossers have caused the destruction just to put windmills up there. The destruction of at least, what was it, 17 million trees or more? Yeah, 17 million trees. In fact, have you noticed even when it comes to cities, they butchered piles and piles and piles of trees that were benefiting so many people, not least in the times when, rarely these days, there's some hot weather. In a city, where you've got trees in a city, the temperature's lower. You take these trees away, the temperature's higher. None of this is rocket science. But on the pursuit of 5G, which, unfortunately, the trees, because of the mass of water that they contain, were stopping the signal. Can you think of another body that has lots of water in it? Oh yes, humanity. Yeah? At certain times in your life, that can be something like 70% of your body is made up of water. Yeah? And they never really discussed that in relation to 5G. Every time I come into Edinburgh, I cannot wait to get out of it. I don't feel great. Yeah? I don't feel great at all. It's a complex subject, vastly complex, but
huge bulk of that wealth is being hoarded by the few. And
by the few. Let's unlock that wealth, put that wealth to work. This is communism on steroids. That's what it is. And it's certainly, when you look historically at communism, it was never for the people. Never. Anytime you see communism kick in, vast amounts of people historically die.
You know, that unlocking that wealth, putting that wealth to work for the benefit of everybody in our society, in Scotland and the UK, could be transformational.
Transformational. Him and, his buddy, this individual, yeah, the co-leaders of the Green Party, they're the ones that keep talking about the transformational changes and paradigm shifts and all the rest of it, which is straight out of Marlon Ferguson's The Aquarian Conspiracy, Personal and Social Transformation. It's like a Bible to the Theosophists and the promotion of an ideology to this vast amounts of underlings that people don't recognize or realize or even see within our societies in the West. Yeah? And I've covered this before, you really need to watch or listen to essentially, from New Discourses, The Occult Theosophy of the United Nations. Now, I absolutely recommend that you listen to it, you download it, go for a wander, headphones on, whatever else, but these kind of vids are so important. The guy's quite eloquent. Do I agree with him in everything he says? Possibly not. But people need to be looking into theosophy. Seriously. It's... Well, for example, that's... they call it the secret meditation room in the United Nations, but I seem to remember it was in the thick of it, some movie, yeah, where it's about politicians and whatever, and at some stage they're in New York and they're in the United Nations headquarters, and that particular, there was a part of this where they actually recorded it in here, if I remember rightly, because most people aren't aware of what's going on or the reality they live in. Anyway, at nearly 15 minutes, and for those of you who've stayed long enough, I thank you. Under fair use, let me play a fraction of this.
He wrote this condensed version where he wrote 59 pages of the ones that he thought were most important in the realm of spiritual direction that the UN should take in world leadership, including, of course, a one world government headquartered through the United Nations or coordinated through the United Nations. And
I'll repeat, it's everything that these people, the Greens, the SNP, various others are implementing policy based on United Nations doctrine. Yeah?
Wealth is being hoarded by the few. And, that unlocking that wealth, putting that wealth to work for the benefit of everybody in our society, in Scotland and the UK, could be transformational.
Transformational change. Where were we? Here.
It's kind of creepy how much of it seems to fit with what we're dealing with, because this is straight occult theosophy guiding the ship of the United Nations, which means...
And that's a straight occult theosophy that is running the Scottish Parliament.
The United Nations, wherever it started as, and like I said, I don't think it started good. I think it's always been an occult theosophical organization, and I think there are reasons to believe that that's true, some of which I've discussed before, like in the WTF is SEL podcast. Certainly for the last 2 decades, since I will say specifically 2003.
And I would say far longer than that, but fair play to him.
Been oriented toward a transformational project, and that
transformational. Honestly, they keep saying this, but most people haven't got the ears to listen when it comes to this kind of stuff.
A transformational project is rooted in occult theosophy, so it's not a good organization, it's not a neutral organization, it's not even really a governing organization. It is an occult organization. It is a, best you could say, is really weird organization. Worst you could say is that it's genuinely an evil organization.
There's no two doubts about it. What you're seeing is evil. Even when you look at Ireland. Absolutely. It's the same thing that's happening. It's the same thing. Yeah? And you've got these, for example, this one from Mark Jush. Anyway. Mark Jush. Anyway. I subscribed to this individual a number of months ago. He does some great vids, and he's just showing you all the tent city stuff and, happening in Dublin. And in this particular video, I'm guessing he's literally at his, he's in his home, property, whatever, flat, rented, otherwise, I have no idea. But he's just literally recording what he's seeing, right? Because it's literally at his doorstep now, yeah? But, I mean, when I'm looking at it, it is like looking at They Live. Type it in, late 80s. As John Carpenter said, it was quite literally a documentary. He stood by this to this day. It's like the externalization of so many things. Now, in the movie, in the film, the baddies were actually aliens working with people on Earth. To most of humanity's expense. It's a must-watch movie, but I would say instead of aliens, what he was actually alluding to was occultism, theosophy, the New Age movement, and so many other interconnected groups that are affecting us to our detriment, to all our detriment, to the destruction of humanity. This transformational change is the destruction of humanity that has been so successful for thousands of years, and this push towards transhumanism, posthumanism. And there you've got your NGOs and all the rest of it in amongst it. They're in on the ground. And in this video, at some stage when somebody realizes he's just taken, he's just watching from out his window at what's going on, it suddenly dawns on some of the NGOs that he's recording. And you could argue, if you watch the movie They Live, what is discussed by the aliens occasionally is, hey, we've got someone that can see. Remember, this is to the detriment, in this case, of Ireland. But you're seeing this happening in the UK. Ireland, honestly, it's hideous what's going on across in Ireland. But remember, most of the Irish people, like, they'll never give them a referendum on that. Do you want immigration? Because I think the answer would be a flat no. So they don't ever pose the question. All well paid, highly motivated, and quite literally in a religious cult. Honestly, I'd love to play an excerpt from They Live. I just know that on my particular channel, yeah, I'd have problems. But really, seriously, watch They Live from the late 80s. And it's like one of those moments where they go, we've got one that can see. Seriously, it's not just the fact that he's standing there or, head out the window with a camera. It's because they realise why he's got his head out the window with a camera. Yeah? And remember, most of these people look like, they've come out of church. Most of them look like Care Bears. But that's the thing. I mean, I keep bumping my gums about this, and, well, obviously, it's still, 171 subs. I'm obviously convincing no one. But you're not dealing with just 1% of society or a fraction of whatever, or like the David Icks of this one I'll keep telling you. You're dealing with, once you work out the numbers between speculative Freemasonry, the Eastern Star, OTO, the New Age movement, Theosophy in general, the numbers start adding up massively. That's why, even when it comes to elections, it's like a religious cult. If you looked at the Oban 3, where Damien's now grown up and all the rest of it, the externalization while he's talking to his flock was that they come from every background. I mean, it's all, this encompasses all creeds, colours and religions. Seriously. Or what goes for religions now. Because people cannot be arsed to look into the likes of Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, Annie Besant, Alice Bailey, various others.
All right, I'm good, sir. What's that? Always.
Are you a supporter of this history? Seriously. Because they're always looking out for those who are awake and can see what's going on.
I'm just recording. Sorry? I'm just recording. Yes, sir. Unfortunately not.
Seriously. We are being carved out from within by a bunch of occultists that factor in potentially, honestly, roughly about 10% of society. And they're the ones with the obligation and the motivation and all the rest of it to be so effective at dismantling the rest of us and everything that we've held dear. And they sleep like babies about it. And people need to grow up and realise what they're dealing with. Subscribe, and I'll speak to you soon.